topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good afternoon. Bill Martinez here. We are live. Good to have you with us. Exciting show for you. After being off a couple weeks, got caught up with, a little bit of the flu bug that was flying around in my travels to Las Vegas and California. Who said what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? The flu doesn't. It chases you down in California. But all is well, and I pray that you're well as you're well as well. How's that, huh? Okay, well, coming up today, as I said, quite an exciting show. John Hart, the Chief Executive Officer of Open the Books, is back with us to give us an update on all things Doge, all things Open the Books, new revelations, things that we the people have been begging for a long time, and that is to take on the waste, the fraud, the corruption of our U.S. government. And Donald Trump is being rewarded handsomely. The latest polling showing that his approval rate is probably as high as it's ever been, 53%, probably the highest ever, actually. And you saw the response at the Super Bowl, during the Star Spangled Banner, and that was, the people cheered him. This is the general response, as opposed to what happened in his first 4 years with all the negative Russian collusion and resistance that was brought to us by the Democratic Party and what damage they did along with Hillary Clinton. And they seem to have gotten away with it with impunity, right? How disappointing is that? But, that's the way it is, a different era right now. A lot of positive things that are being done. So looking forward to talking to John Hart about that. And then also we'll go to Jerusalem in the second half of the show to talk with the Chief Executive Officer of JNS. Alex Traiman is going to give us an update on the hostages. We saw the release of the hostages, and Donald Trump had made the comment that it was, in a sense, and this is my interpretation, not his verbatim comment, but it means the same thing. And that is that the pictures that he saw reminded him of Holocaust victims, these three latest hostages to be released. I mean, this is spiking a response from Israelis to get the hostages out of there. And as we know from our previous reporting, the International Red Cross, I should say, they have been in Israeli jails to check on the Palestinians, to make sure their welfare and everything is appropriate, from diet, go on down the list. This is not what's happening with Hamas. I mean, Hamas are terrorists. They're not civil people. They don't care about the hostages. And that's clear. I mean, we don't even know of the remaining hostages. I think there's, over 70 remaining hostages. We don't even know how many of those are going to be brought back in body bags. And I'm telling you, that's a heartbreak. I mean, you saw the response already with just these last three hostages. And it is upsetting. It's heartbreaking. And there is this increased sense of urgency. And I will say this, that the people of Israel, whether in America or in Israel itself proper, are very supportive of what Donald Trump is doing. So right now, let's bring on John Hart, the Chief Executive Officer of Open the Books. John, good afternoon. Good to have you with us, sir.
It's great to be back on. How are you, Bill?
Hey, I'm doing terrific. Thank you so much, for coming on. From day one, I have believed that Elon Musk needed to connect with Open the Books. I mean, you've got records, you've got information that I don't think that a judge could block because it's been long established. So I don't know. I'm a little confused as to why Elon Musk and his team have not connected with you.
Well, no, I think they are using the data that we have built. They're putting out our reports and different tweeting things that we've been cited in. So I think they are using the data. And the thing to keep in mind too is back when we created USA spending, that was almost 20 years ago. So we put all federal spending online, let people search it through USA spending. So what I'm urging Doge and Elon Musk to do is to really create an upgraded version of that. And I would call it America's checkbook. And
Yes. Wow.
what Elon and Doge, what they've done, this is really exciting. They have a look at what's called the Treasury payment system. So the Treasury payment system is kind of like the holy of holies for the administrative state. It's where the inner sanctum, and it's only the high priests that get to access the holy of holies. So part of the reason you see this panic on the left is that you have people who actually are looking at waste and fraud who have access to the money going out the door. So there's the Willy Loman principle. It's follow the money. So what Elon and Doge have done is they've gone in and they've actually gained access to the system. And the update now is a federal judge, an Obama era judge, actually blocked them from doing that. And the claim is, well, they don't have the authority, they don't have the proper clearances to look at this quote sensitive data. And I think that's going to get worked out. They're not going to be permanently barred from that. But what I'm urging Elon and Doge to do is to use the access to that to give the American people the same access they're now enjoying.
Exactly.
And the concept is as you know and your listeners know, is that the money in the Treasury payment system, it doesn't belong to the federal government. It doesn't belong to the president. It doesn't belong to Congress or any agency. It belongs to we the people.
We the people.
So that is our money in the Treasury payment system. And so the concept is just as we ought to have the right to access that, just as we have the right to access our own personal checking account. So whether you're on Bank of America, Chase, Truist, wherever, you have the ability to go in, and the difference is if it's your personal account, you can write checks, but I don't have the power. I don't want the power to write checks out of your account, and I don't want to give you the right to do that to my account. That's called redistribution. Yeah. Now, when you have a government, we all pay taxes into that. So we don't get to control individually. That's why we have a representative system of government. But we at least have the right to see. We have the right to access and understand what is going out under our authority. And there is no government other than a government that happens by consent. We have a system of the consent of the governed. So these are basic fundamental principles of democratic governance and constitutional government. And so all of the talk about, it's a constitutional crisis for Elon Musk to have access to the system. It really begs the question, well, who was in charge before? We're talking about the executive branch having access to the payment system the executive branch controls. So there's no constitutional problem there. The constitutional problem and questions are, it is true that only Congress has the authority to appropriate money. But the president has authority too. He has the authority of the veto pen. And there's a big gray area on executive orders. And the gray area is the result of this 100-year experiment that the left has mounted called the administrative state, where through a very deliberate effort, we've outsourced authority and power to unelected bureaucrats. And that's really going to be, that's what the argument and fight that they're forcing. And that's needed to happen for decades. So it's a really exciting, important moment. And I hope they capitalize on it and hope they lock in some of these new transparency tools that the American people desperately need.
Well, exactly. It's what they're asking for, John. John, I was going to ask you, what arrogance, what hubris that this administrative state has been able to exercise. And that was my question, was going to be, when did this start to happen? And you just said it was, ever since the birth of the administrative state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it actually happened. It happened 100 years ago. This was really the dream of kind of the Woodrow Wilson first progressives, and then you had FDR that really supercharged it, and then the Great Society, and that's the path we've been on. And so I call that's the quiet constitutional crisis we've been living under. Is this decline of individual autonomy, this decline of state power, and this rapid growth of the unelected administrative experts. And the argument that they made 100 years ago is, well, we've advanced so much in the 150 years of our country. Society is too complicated. We need to really create this class of experts who will help us save us from ourselves and manage this new complex life we have in 1910 and 1920.
Yeah.
And that was really the precursor to this massive expansion of federal government power that then turned into creating the Department of Education in 1980, Great Society before that, and New Deal. And I'm not advocating we get rid of every safety net program. I think we need to reform them. But we've gone so far that direction that the reason people are panicking is finally someone actually is moving it back in a dramatic way the other direction. As we've talked about before, we've had some successes with limiting, getting rid of earmarks for a decade, cutting spending for the first time since the Korean War back in 2012, 2013, during the Coburn Tea Party era.
Yes.
But Elon is going to take this to a whole new level, which is very, very exciting and long overdue.
Well, we're really lifting the hood in this mechanical beast that, as you say, you go from, the early 1900s and fast forward to 2025, and the elites that, supposedly knew better than the cumulative consciousness of 300 million people. What have they done? They've run us into the ditch. And on top of that, the monies that they have signed have misrepresented the hearts of the American people, John. I mean, the American people wonder, they go, why do these nations hate us so much? And little did they know, because they're thinking, hey, I look at my tax bill, I see all this money going out to support these nations, and they hate us. Well, what they don't realize is that we have these U.S. aid programs that are promoting color revolutions and disrupting their traditional family life and religious life in their countries. Thank you very much, USA, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been funding everything for transgender shows, operas in Ireland. We've done drag shows in Ecuador. So there, DEI overseas. There's been a litany of ridiculous programs that we funded, and let's kind of unwind that, because when you go back to kind of the post-war era. So one of the interesting things about my family background is my great uncle flew in the Berlin airlift. Oh, wow. And that was in a sense, you could say that was foreign aid, but it was for a very specific purpose. We weren't doing that for charity. We were doing it to help our own national security. We didn't want the Soviet Union. We didn't want to start World War III. So what they did is they drew a line in the sand and said, no, we're going to provide support for West Berlin, and they did that airlift. And so I'm not advocating that we don't have any role overseas, or we don't have any humanitarian role, but we don't need to be funding drag shows in Ecuador. Well, and what USAID did is they refused to allow themselves to have oversight and be regulated. Senator Joni Ernst has a great op-ed in today's Wall Street Journal that really is aligned with what Coburn experienced when he was trying to reform programs in USAID, is that they do not want anyone to have control over their budget. It's this fiefdom. So again, that's what happens when you create the administrative state, is you shift power away from individuals and even away from Congress. Congress has given its power away. Yeah. And when someone comes in and conducts oversight,
amazing to me. So they're up in arms about everything that Trump does. Oh my goodness, that job belongs to Congress. Well, what about all the other jobs that you've abdicated, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's in our, so the question of the test really should be is, what is in our national security interest? It's kind of this idea of enlightened self-interest. It's in our enlightened self-interest to help Israel, for example.
Yes.
It's not in our enlightened self-interest to fund a transgender opera in Ireland. No. Those are two very different things. And so that's really what the administration is doing, is they're trying to have a common sense conversation and keep the things that are good and put those under the State Department, but do not allow this agency to hoard power and fund things that are contrary to our national interest. That's what's happening right now.
I look at this and I almost think, oh my goodness, Mel Brooks was a bit prescient here, with his plate of producers, right? It's springtime with Hitler in Germany. I mean, how ridiculous, And this is like, you look at all these expenditures, but like one senator said, after a while, you're talking real money here, and we're talking lots of real money, especially when we're 36, looking at $37 trillion in debt, right?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, and there's other examples. Every day there's a new example. I mean, today there's a report that we've spent $59 million, paying to put illegal immigrants in hotels in New York City.
Exactly.
And that's been happening for months, where
FEMA's out of money. They can't support North Carolina or Los Angeles, but we can support the illegals in New York City.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And they're destroying whole blocks and hotels and communities. And that's what people are upset about, and rightly so. And so Doge is really just getting started. And I think they're going to continue to find these examples. And then I'm hopeful that really to lock these things into place, you really need to take advantage of the moment to have a better transparency tool that improves on what we've already built. But then also work with the Doge caucuses, the members of Congress like Joni Ernst and Gary Palmer and others on the House side to come up with kind of an agency reorganization so that these things can be written into law. And you have all of these progressive members of Congress panicking. It's like, well, if you don't like what they're doing, go pass a new law. Pass a law that says, I want to spend taxpayer money putting up illegals in New York. I want a law that says we have to fund a DEI project in Ecuador or a drag show. And if that's what you believe, put it in the law and make it happen. And don't complain about oversight.
Well, the Republicans are, in a sense, kind of missing an opportunity here, because a wave is being generated to deal with this problem. And as you say, the door is open for Republicans to lead the way to write law to answer this problem, because the Democrats, meanwhile, they're lost in the wilderness. They have no idea where North and South is, no matter all that, critical Democrat analysts have been suggesting for them. They just want to stay angry instead of, hey, look, at the American people have spoken. They gave Donald Trump the plurality of the vote. They reelected him into office. His approval rate is sky high at 53%. I believe it's the highest it's ever been, John.
It is, yeah. And Bill, I think really the reason he was elected is that people believed and they felt in their daily lives they were better off under President Trump than they were under Biden.
Oh, without a doubt.
There is a direct correlation. Yeah, there's a direct correlation between government spending and inflation. And the administration knows this. And so they've started with, things that they believe they're going to get public support for. But I know they're going to very quickly move to the higher dollar items, things like cutting $100 billion of fraud out of Medicare and Medicaid. There is an enormous amount of healthcare fraud. And when you start to shift that money out of fraud, where it's doing nothing other than enriching fraudsters and criminals, and letting people keep more of that in their own pockets, so we can save and invest it, spend it at your local small business, that's when you have economic growth and inflation goes down. And they have barely even looked at energy. Like energy, there's a fantastic new energy secretary, Chris Wright.
Yes.
Really somebody you should follow. Chris, and I've done some work with him before on this idea that the answer to all of our economic and environmental challenges is economic freedom. We need more energy, not less. We don't need to demonize traditional sources of energy. We need to, if you care about the planet, if you care about conservation, we need to be drilling as much as we can, because we do energy so much cleaner and more efficiently in the United States than they do in China and Russia and other countries that are hostile to our interests.
Right.
And so there's Doge is going to move to those different areas, and it's very, very exciting to see them use these new tools to do forensic auditing in a way that we've been doing. So they're taking what we're doing it well, and we want everyone to have access to all the great information they have.
Well, plus you've got all of Elon Musk's database and people that subscribe to him and connect with him. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, what other media content commands the number of ears and eyes that Elon Musk does? And so with him being transparent, saying, hey, this is what we found out. I mean, like today that we're building a monument with holy water for Dr. Fauci or something.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, and so today also there was the Treasury secretaries of the past, predominantly Democratic administrations, are criticizing his access to this data and saying, you're not qualified to access the data. Well, there's no one on earth who's more qualified to look at the data in the Treasury payment system than Elon Musk and the team of brilliant young data scientists that he's assembled.
Driving the Democrats nuts, isn't it? I mean, you got these young people, these 18, 19-year-old wonderkins that just say, hey, this looks weird. What is this line item for? Just asking the question, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and we've shown the power of what we call crowdsourcing oversight, where we made all the data from USA spending available. We want to get a more rapid, sort of immediate look at it, which is what the Treasury payment system allows. So I'm convinced there's a way to give the public, again, read-only access to this data, so that we can. There's going to be, for every 4 or 5 people Elon has hired, there's going to be hundreds of people all over the country that would find this information useful. And so much of the traffic that's talked about, all these examples of waste, the fact that we can even find them is something that we intentionally created the capacity for people to do. So it's open the books, but it's also a lot of other just good faith citizens who are doing their own research and scratching their heads and wondering why are we funding this? And then they post it online, and there's a discussion about it. There's a debate. And that's how our founders wanted our country to work.
Yeah, you talk about a constitutionalized government and the consent of the governed. This is what it's all about, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, John, as we wrap things up here, your open letter to Elon Musk to keep the conversation and the lines of communication open. I know Joni Ernst said that on day one, she presented Elon Musk with 8 pages. And I had to chuckle a little bit because I'm thinking, knowing John Hart, he's probably got about 8 million pages that he give to Elon Musk. That's just me. I know you wouldn't say that. I'm not expecting you to say that, but just knowing you and knowing the team and Adam Andrzejewski and in his spirit and open the books and Senator Coburn, you've got plethora of information here that will that will reach the objective that the American people have put at the doorstep of one Donald Trump, right?
You got it. We're going to keep up the pressure, Bill. Appreciate everything you're doing as well.
Well, God bless you. I just am so grateful for you and the team. Keep up the great work on our behalf, because if we're going to be a constitutional government, form of government, a republic, then we need to find where we lost our way, go back like any good CEO would do. When any organization has lost its way, they go back and say, where did we make the wrong turn? And I think that has yet to be done. I'm hopeful that it can be done, because it's almost like you have to go forward. You have to go back in order to go forward, right?
No, that's exactly right. And you can trace this again, 100 years ago, this was a very intentional move away from the founders' limitations on government power. And that's why we're in the situation we're in today.
Well, you got it.
But I believe the capacity of the people to fix it.
Well, John Hart, thank you. John Hart is the Chief Executive Officer of Open the Books. OpenTheBooks.com is where you can go to be fully informed and stay up to date on all things Doge, all things government efficiency, waste, and fraud. John, thank you for being with us. Take care.
Thanks, Bill. Take care.
Our gratitude to John Hart. What a great guy and a great team on behalf of the American people, that have asked Donald Trump, fix it. We know that there's problems here. And of course, the early reports that we got from Doge was extremely revealing. So how do you go back? As John said, we have got to take on the inefficiencies of this administrative state and take back our government. This is what the American people are demanding. We go now to Jerusalem, Israel, to connect with the Chief Executive Officer of JNS. Alex Traiman joins us now. Alex, good afternoon. Good to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Bill. Great to see you again.
Hey, thank you so much for being with us. I'm so grateful that you were here to talk about, one of the first the topics that our audience has, Alex, is the hostages, the recent hostage release. Donald Trump shockingly said, very anecdotally, that it reminded him, seeing these three hostages come out, it reminded him of Holocaust survivors. That is a powerful statement, Alex.
Oh, I mean, I think that everybody can see, just what horrific monsters Hamas are. There was pictures of these hostages released, and you see the before and after photos, lost something like 40, 50 pounds. There was a picture that came out of the three of them in a tiny cell, which was clearly in one of the underground tunnels, where they were kept barely with any food, certainly without any natural light. They're suffering from severe malnutrition, and it also underscores how urgent it is to get all of these hostages out as soon as possible, because they literally can be life or death for them if they remain in captivity.
And by contrast, the Palestinians that have been released from Israel have been health checked by the Red Cross. They come out, they look fairly good. I mean, some have said they've actually gained weight, not lost weight.
The conditions in Israeli prison for terrorists are shocking when you understand how good they have it. They're basically living in dormitories and bunks with televisions in their rooms. Many of them have cell phones. They're eating every day. Many Palestinian prisoners get education when they're in Israeli jails, some completing university degrees, even doctorates. Yahya Sinwar himself was sitting in an Israeli prison, and he was operated on for a brain tumor when he was a prisoner in Israeli jails, and he was released in another prisoner exchange, part of an exchange of 1,000 terrorists in exchange for one Israeli soldier. And the thanks that Israel gets for saving his life and releasing him was the October 7th attacks.
Well, exactly. And this is what Israel, understandably, and Israelites, I should say, are concerned about, is that they're releasing future terrorists clearly because of, as has been said, if you want to know what somebody's going to do, look what they've done.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we know statistically that they go back to committing acts of terror. It is an honor for these Palestinian terrorists to be sitting in an Israeli jail. It is literally a badge of honor. They do not get rehabilitated in Israeli jails. They get further incited to violence. And it's the type of immoral choice that Israel has to make, which is basically, redeeming captives now, saving a life now, when it's almost certain that someone else is going to die later as a result of that. But what do you do? I mean, this is the type of moral calculations that Israel has to make, and how much we value the lives of those we can save now, and only hope that, we can track these individuals and hopefully prevent the violence that they will commit later.
Yeah, you can only hope that maybe the Mossad or somebody would give them a pager on their way out the door. Just saying, but that's just me, which I thought was a brilliant move by the IDF, by the way, and many others felt the same way. But because these are dangerous individuals, they've proven to be. I mean, so much so, Alex, that even the neighbor Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, doesn't want any part of the 2 million Palestinians coming out of Hamas, for good reason, right?
Well, they don't want them. They don't care about them. They only use them as pawns against Israel to delegitimize Israel. They're worried that these individuals, if they come into their country, will destabilize their country. They're not worried if they destabilize Israel. In fact, they're happy if they destabilize Israel. But there's not been one country since October 7th that has raised their hand and said, we will take displaced Palestinians. If you remember the Russia-Ukraine war's beginning, 6 million Ukrainians fled. And the question was, who's going to take Ukrainian refugees? Even Israel took something like 35,000 Ukrainian refugees, but not a single country in the world is ready to take a Gazan. And I think that should tell you what they think about Gazans. Right now, even when you see the images coming out of Gaza and you recognize that Israel has destroyed something like 60 to 70% of all of the buildings in Gaza, leveling complete cities to the ground, and knowing that Palestinians are living in tents. It's the winter now. It's the rain season in Israel, and they're just sitting in muddy tents, and they're still saying, "We will not take a single Gazan into our territory."
Exactly. Well, and the thing is that with Donald Trump in the meeting with Bibi Netanyahu comes up with the idea that, hey, maybe we can turn Gaza into the Mediterranean of the Middle East, the new Middle East Mediterranean Riviera.
Riviera.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Gaza could look like Tel Aviv. It's just 30, 40 miles south of Tel Aviv. We know what Tel Aviv can look like. It's beautiful,
Right.
and anybody would want to live there. And the only reason why Gaza doesn't look like Tel Aviv is because the Gazans live there, and because they had control over the territory, and they don't recognize the value of the real estate. They don't care, and they turn their what should have been a heaven into a terror haven. And I think that Trump understands that if Gaza gets rebuilt the way, and the Gazans are still there, it's just going to be the same thing that it was, and Israel will just come in another time and destroy it again. And I think that what he's seeking to do, which is amazing, and I don't think it was a surprise to Netanyahu that he said it, but what I think that he's going to do is ultimately end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for all time, and say to the Palestinians, you have lost the conflict. You tried to win it. You've lost. And now it's time for you to leave. And this is going to be Israel. It's not going to be a Palestinian state anywhere between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea.
Well, let's go back in history, Alex. God designated the Gaza to Israel. That is holy land in and of itself. And there's got to be a reason that all this destruction has happened. I can't help but believe that maybe God is reclaiming that land for Israel. What do you think?
I mean, it's prophetic what we're seeing now. I mean, there's literally prophecies that Jewish people read from the writings about what will happen, and about a great war taking place in Israel, and it taking 7 months to clear the dead bodies, and nobody knew what they were talking about. But when you realize that Gaza actually is part of the biblical Israel, I mean, the biblical patriarch Isaac. He is known to have never left the land of Israel. That was one of his many attributes. And yet God told him to go down to Gerar, and Gerar is the area that we know today as Gaza. So, Isaac was in Gaza, but he never left Israel. So what does that tell you about the status of Gaza?
Exactly. And the devastation of Gaza, I mean, it's like Damascus. I mean, it's been so leveled, as you said, 60, 70% of the land. And maybe, for the Arab nations, the fact that Donald Trump puts out this idea saying, hey, look, we'll bring in our labor force, our intelligence, and our assistance to help clean up that land, because this is not going to be a minor issue. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars to clean up the Gaza, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think billions is like understating the level of the devastation there. I mean, you're starting to see just how bad the damage has been. So in some cities where literally every building is knocked down, and the buildings that aren't knocked down need to be knocked down because they're also pocketed with either bullet marks or unstable. I mean, the whole thing basically has to be completely and totally destroyed. It's going to take many, many billions of dollars. It's going to take many years to rebuild. And I think I think Trump rather, just looks at this like a possible real estate transaction. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is a distressed asset right here. We can sweep in, and we can buy property here on the cheap, and we can develop something beautiful that can be worth. I mean, Tel Aviv property is some of the most expensive property in the entire world. So let's just build another Tel Aviv over here, and we'll reap rewards. It's just a real estate deal for him.
Well, the challenge, I mean, first of all, you've got the land to recover, to remunerate. You've got unexploded munitions, God only knows where, that have to be discovered and rooted out, and 2 million mean Gazans that are terrorists of heart. How do you manage that? I think the Gaza issue is probably bigger than the land issue.
Well, if you recognize how much leverage the United States has over countries like Jordan and Egypt, it's a tremendous amount of leverage. I mean, both of those countries are completely reliant on American aid, so certainly military support.
Exactly.
And you see how the president has been using negotiation tactics with Canada, with Mexico, regarding tariffs, and even with Greenland and Panama. And I think that there's a lot of leverage. Egypt's saying right now that they won't take any Gazans. I mean, the natural place for them to go is across the border into Egypt. And what's interesting about the war is that also the Houthis basically interrupted all of the commercial shipping through the Suez Canal, which is one of Egypt's largest drivers of revenue. And Egypt's a very poor country as it is, and they've been hurt almost as badly as Israel financially by this war because of the Houthis' action. In fact, you wonder why the Egyptians did not attack the Houthis, because the Egyptians have an air force, and the Houthis were harming Egyptian national interest.
Exactly.
And Egypt even took a $1.5 billion loan in the last several weeks. So they're really hurting for cash. And I think that Trump can use the leverage and say, we'll give you a major package to figure out a solution to put Gazans in the Sinai Peninsula, which is a very large and open territory where most of the Egyptian populace doesn't live. And it's available, and they can get money for taking them. And on the flip side, if they don't take them, that he can turn off the spigot of American funding. He can turn off the spigot of American military aid to Egypt. So I think that there's a lot of pressure that he can put on Egypt, and he can similarly put on Jordan. And I think he can also put some pressure on Qatar, which needs to prove.
What about Saudi Arabia?
And Saudi Arabia. Exactly. The Saudis have always come forward and said that, they wanted to see a pathway toward a Palestinian state in order to normalize relations with Israel. But nobody's defined where that Palestinian state needs to be. And perhaps the Saudis or the Egyptians or Jordan or all three. And the president has said that. He said, I don't know, maybe one place, maybe two, maybe six. I don't know. That's what the president has said. So perhaps the Saudis will see a new pathway towards the Palestinian entity someplace else. And then you'll even see them come around and normalize relations with Israel.
Well, Alex, my understanding is that Saudi Arabia would be optimum because of their police force, that they have a very robust law enforcement organization that could keep Hamas and keep these terrorists in check. And I think maybe that's part of the challenge for some of these neighboring countries is going, well, that's fine and well, we let them in here, but they're radical, and who's going to keep an eye on them?
Exactly. That's the big problem. I mean, and that's a big problem also for Jordan, which is already a majority of that country is Palestinian, right?
Yes.
If you would just look at Jordan by demographics, you would say this is a Palestinian state because well over 50% of the Jordanians happen to be Palestinian. And so the last thing that they want is 2 million more Palestinians coming in there because, number one, then it will be the end of the Hashemite kingdom. It'll be the end of King Abdullah's rule, will be overrun and will definitively become the Palestinian state, which maybe it should be. And two, like we've seen how they've destabilized the countries, previously back in the 70s. Everybody remembers Black September. So it's a big question. And if you thought that the Palestinians could have made peace before, well, they're certainly going to be more radicalized, not less radicalized by what happened on October 7th.
Well, exactly. Like in areas, like you say, you mentioned in Jordan, you have to look at the demographic compilation of how the balance is there right now. And, 2 million people may not sound like a lot, but if you add 2 million aggressives into that area, as you said, it could knock things out of kilter. And then you've got a situation there where I think you've got a kind of a balance between Sunni and Shia, right? And so now the Hamas agency is more Shia than Sunni, right?
No, Hamas is a Sunni. Yeah, Hamas is Sunni.
Yeah,
most of Jordan is Sunni, but as you said, there's about 11 million people living in Jordan right now. So if you add 2 million Palestinians, and you probably already have about 6 million Palestinians living in Jordan. So if it became 8 million Palestinians out of 13 million people in total, that really does affect the demographic balance of the country. In a place like Egypt, where you have maybe many more people, I think something like 70 million, but I need to check it. Or in Saudi Arabia, where the population is considerably larger, they can absorb a bunch, and even better if you can split them up. And kind of reduce the number so that not one singular country has to absorb all of them.
Well, Alex, I want to talk about Bibi Netanyahu's meeting with Trump in the White House. Trump immediately released munitions to Israel. And I got to believe that he did so because he knows that Israel is prepared to take on Iran. Because as he has said, and others have stipulated repeatedly, Iran cannot become a nuclear country.
That's correct. And there might have been a little bit of a disagreement between Netanyahu and Trump during the visit on the next steps to take vis-a-vis Iran. The president has already announced that he's going to reinforce crippling sanctions on the Iranian regime, and that he wants to try to negotiate with the Iranians to dismantle their own nuclear facilities. I don't really know how you trust the Iranians to dismantle their entire nuclear program. I mean, you can even see a scenario in which they say, sure, we'll dismantle our program, and they'll dismantle, some degree of sites. It will take a long time for them to do it. And they probably will leave other sites that are buried deep underground untouched. Israel knows where most of these sites are. I think that Israel is probably looking for a green light to attack. When it comes to the weapons that were released, we now understand that the Biden administration was lying when they said they only were withholding a singular shipment of 2,000-pound bombs. Both the Trump administration and the Netanyahu administration now have confirmed that it was many more shipments of many different types of weapons. And one of the questions being rightfully asked right now is, aside from the weapons that Israel had already paid for and was supposed to receive even from the previous administration, is the United States now releasing some bunker busting bombs that the Biden administration never was going to release? And these are the types of bombs that Israel would need to conduct fast and effective strikes on Iran's underground nuclear facilities.
Well, we know in the last attacks, Israel made it quite evident that they could attack Iran at will, and they took out their air defense. So, in a sense, they're ripe for the picking. And the bunker busting bombs have been a point of contention going back to the Obama years, which was, if Obama was sincere in saying that Iran would never go nuclear, we knew that he had his fingers crossed. He was lying to the American people about that.
Yeah, I think that we know that that's the case. Not only was he complicit with Iran crossing the nuclear threshold, they didn't think that a nuclear Iran was any more dangerous than a nuclear India or any other country. But here, if you see how much Iran has destabilized the entirety of the Middle East, even before they have a nuclear umbrella. I mean, it's not just Israel. Right? They've destabilized Iraq. They've destabilized Syria, which now collapsed. They destabilized Lebanon. They've destabilized Yemen, which was involved in a war with Saudi Arabia. They have destabilized the entire region, and them and their proxies have attacked Israel from 7 different countries. And that's before they have nuclear weapons. And this is a country that doesn't say, we want nuclear weapons for our own self-defense. They're screaming death to Israel, death to America. The leaders of Iran are saying, we will wipe the state of Israel off the face of the earth. Okay, this is an existential threat. When mullahs that put their money where their mouth is and are funding terror organizations all over the world saying, we're developing nuclear weapons and we want to wipe this country off the face of the earth, we're not going to we're going to take that seriously. So, Trump, I think, is come around, and he said even this week, even since the meeting with Netanyahu, we're going to negotiate a deal with Iran to make sure that they never cross the threshold, or Israel's going to attack them. That's one of the two. So, we have to see what the timeline is. I know for Israel, I don't know if they want to wait to see how effective sanctions can be. I think for Prime Minister Netanyahu, he believes that this is a now or never moment. You mentioned that the air defenses have been stripped. So it does seem like the timing for an Israeli strike is very good.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, we got a couple of minutes left here. And you mentioned Syria. And of course, that takes me north to Turkey. We've got to keep our eyes on Turkey, right?
Absolutely. Iran's influence over the region is weakening dramatically, and we see that the second Hezbollah wasn't there and Iran's air defenses were stripped, that created a weakness that was exploited. But Al-Jolani, who's now considered the de facto president of Syria, who the Biden administration says is reformed, I mean, he's got Al-Qaeda connections, and it's very clear that he and his terror faction have been trained and armed by Turkey. Turkey also smelled the weakness, and whenever a vacuum gets created in the Middle East, different forces are going to try to fill that vacuum. And so Turkey is trying to fill that vacuum and sees Syria as a forward-facing base against the state of Israel. And so this is really just trading at this point one enemy for another. Israel is quite aware of how dangerous a threat Turkey could be, and they're going to remain on guard.
And what could this mean for the Kurds?
I think that if you see solid diplomacy, led by the Trump administration, you could see a bloc where the Kurds and the Druze in southern Lebanon and Israel form an alliance that basically kind of cuts off Syria in half and makes sure that Turkey's backed forces can only remain in the north section of that country, so that there is a buffer zone between Turkey's forces and the state of Israel. The Kurds are an ethnic minority that deserve a state much more than Palestinians, and that includes Syria, and that also includes the Iraqi Kurds. A lot of these countries were drawn up, by imperialist British and French after World War II, and we'll see if they wind up getting a state. Certainly, there would be a natural alliance between the Kurds and the state of Israel.
Well, our thanks to Alex Traiman, the Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish News Syndicate. JNS.org is where you want to go to stay informed. Any parting words here, Alex, as we wrap things up?
Well, thank you so much, Bill. I mean, I definitely think we got to keep our close eye on Trump's policies, but I can tell you that for the first time that the Netanyahu administration and the Trump administration were getting together like friends, which is a lot different than the reluctant allies that Israel had with the previous administration.
Well, Alex Traiman, again, thank you so much. Shalom. Take care.
Shalom. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Got it. Well, that's a wrap for us. Our thanks and gratitude to Alex Traiman from JNS. JNS.org is where you want to go for more information, as we mentioned, to stay up to date on all things in the Middle East. They do such an outstanding job in keeping us up to date, and that's why I'm so grateful for Alex to take the time. It's very late in Israel right now, for him to stay up late and to go around the entire region and give us an update on all these different factions and, possibilities for peace in the Middle East, ladies and gentlemen. And we continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Also, again, thanks to John Hart, the Chief Executive Officer of Open the Books. OpenTheBooks.com is where you want to go for more information to stay in the flow of the node. Did I say .com.org? Anyway, the information is all right there. All that Doge is doing, all that Open the Books has been doing, for 20 plus years, almost 25 years now, in terms of, doing a deep drill dive into the fraud and waste and corruption of our government. This is what you've been asking for. This has been going on for over 100 years, ladies and gentlemen. We know it. And now we have an opportunity. I mean, this is a clarion moment that we're at right now that requires courage, it requires conviction and leadership. And we have the leadership in Donald Trump. And we need to continue to support what Donald Trump is doing, Elon Musk, and those 18, 19-year-old wonderkins that are asking questions as they go looking through this evidence and the books that our government has been hiding away from us. I mean, as others have said, if you have nothing to hide and you're so honest, then why are you hiding things? I mean, there is a reason that they do not want us to know. And we've gotten already a shocking brief look at what's happened with our money, just with USAID, like 20 million for Sesame Street show in Iraq propaganda, 56 million to boost tourism in Tunisia and Egypt. Who knew, right? 40 million to build schools in Jordan, like they don't have enough money already. 11 million to tell Vietnam to stop burning trash. $11 million, right? Let's tell them stop burning trash. That it requires $11 million of America's tax money. 2 million to strengthen trans-led organizations to deliver gender-affirming healthcare. This is where it goes down a slippery slope, because then you get DEI involved, DEI scholarships in Burma, $45 million. I mean, this smacks of a color revolution where America, in the name of the United States of America and red, white, and blue, go in and disrupt the traditions and the faith of communities. And that's a case in point right there. $520 million for consultant-driven ESG investments in Africa. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I want to thank you all for joining us and sharing a part of your afternoon with us. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine about you. God bless. Thank you. Take care.